This is our lesson 19 in A Course in Miracles today. So this is our 19th day and our 19th lesson. They may all start running together a little bit, and yet they're building on each other. And I just wanted to make sure that we're maybe kind of understanding or maybe starting to see that a little bit. I'm not going to go through all of them up to 19. I'm going to touch on the last handful, the lesson 13, just as a review. That day we did our lesson was A Meaningless World Engenders Fear. That was last Wednesday, I believe. Then on Thursday we did our lesson was around this idea that God did not create a meaningless world, right? And a lot of dialogue around that. And then lesson 15 on Friday was my thoughts are images that I have made. And that whole idea that we always go back to our past to come up with what it is we say we see or think, right? Because then on Monday it was about seeing, I believe, right? It was lesson 16. Oh, it's still about thoughts. And then we started moving into what we see. So Monday was I have no neutral thoughts. So that a whole idea around there's no such thing as a neutral thought. So what are you doing when you're not being purposeful in your thinking? And then 17 was I see no neutral things. Lesson 18 yesterday is I am not alone in experiencing the effects of my seeing. So I had a couple of questions from yesterday. I just wanted to kind of pose for you because I thought maybe asking the question after you've been working with that lesson might be a better way to kind of bring a little bit of a closure to that lesson, if you will. So again, remember, lesson 18 was I am not alone in experiencing the effects of my seeing. And it was that idea that we're in this together, and that's the thought that we're really all connected. And this is the first time we kind of talked about that. Now, in the past, so we have talked about why we tend not to look at ourselves as being a part of a collective, if you will, or all connected somehow, because ego wants to set us apart. Ego, and remember when we talked about ego, that was back last Thursday, where I used the acronym, and that's another way I've heard that word used is edging God out, meaning, I'm smarter than something more powerful than I am. And then I have to set myself apart from everybody else as well. That's all ego. That's all ego. And so that's really where that lesson was coming from, where it brings it back to say, no, we are all together in this. So I've got 3 questions. You may want to write these down and just ponder them, if you will. The first question is this. When we think about that I have no neutral thoughts and and I see no neutral things, and that you're not alone in experiencing the effects of what you're seeing, the question is this. When you anticipate that you will have a future negative experience, do you enter the experience with an open mind or with a sense of dread? Now, I asked this question yesterday as well, and I want to just come back to it. So what happened as you worked through the exercise yesterday? Do you think that might change for you? Are you going to go into something that you might be anticipating to not be so good and be more open to it? That's really the idea. And then the other one is, will your preconceived notion of whatever that event might be limit what is possible for you to experience from that event? And I love that question because I think that's what happens far too often for many of us. Again, I talked a little bit yesterday about a statement that I learned years ago that we called it then already always thinking and already always hearing. Or listening, really. And already always meant that, remember I used the example of the Peanuts cartoon character's teacher, where, the minute she started speaking, all she heard was wah, 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 wah. And we do that because of how we've been conditioned up to this point, right? We go back to our past. The minute, you encounter someone, you're like, oh, here we go. They're going to tell me something, blah, 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 blah. And so you just tune them out. This is about being aware. This is about being aware and having awareness and being open to possibility, because when we're open to possibility, even though we think we know how whatever that encounter is going to be, we might discover something wonderful. There's a reason this is called A Course in Miracles. It's not called A Course in Happier Living. It's not called A Course in Learning Lessons to Be Better. It's called A Course in Miracles. And in miracles, that's a big statement. And that's really what this starts letting us do. So lesson 19 is kind of more along that same lines. And so our lesson today is this one. It says, I am not alone in experiencing the effects of my thoughts. I'm not alone in experiencing the effects of my thoughts. So we said yesterday that you're not alone in in experiencing the effects of your seeing. So what you see now, it's what you're thinking. So that's lesson 19. So let me read the lesson, then I'm going to break it down for us as well. So lesson 19. It says, the idea for today, which is I am not alone in experiencing the effects of my thoughts, is obviously the reason why your seeing does not affect you alone. You will notice that at times the ideas related to thinking precede those related to perceiving, while at other times the order is reversed. This is one of those times, because we did our thinking a lot of times before our seeing in some of the other lessons. So, and the reason it's reversed so that the ideas related to perceiving come before the ideas related to the thinking. The reason that it is, the order being that way, is that it doesn't matter. So that's the reason. Thinking and thinking's results, which is perceiving, are really simultaneous. For cause and effect are never separate. So let me say that again. So thinking and thinking's results, which really is perceiving, are really simultaneous. For cause and effect are never separate. Today we are again emphasizing the fact that minds are joined. The fact that minds are joined is rarely a wholly welcome idea at first, since the fact that minds are joined seems to carry with it an enormous sense of responsibility and may even be regarded as an invasion of privacy. Yet it is a fact that minds are joined and that there are no private thoughts. You say that again. It is a fact that minds are joined and there are no private thoughts. So despite your initial resistance to this idea that minds are joined and that there are no private thoughts, you will yet understand that this joining must be true if salvation is possible at all. And salvation must be possible because salvation is the will of God. And I'm going to go for a minute. I'm going to do a little sidestep because salvation we've touched on briefly, and I wanted to go back into the actual the text of A Course in Miracles to talk about the context of salvation from that respect. So it's broken down into atonement and salvation. So they're used kind of synonymous together in this course. It says A Course in Miracles frequently refers to what is called the atonement. To understand the meaning of the word within A Course in Miracles framework, we need to first understand what it does not mean. Atonement is not expiation for sin, because in God's reality, sin does not exist. The word does not imply penance or punishment, only a need for correction. Nor does atonement require sacrifice of any kind from anyone. See, the atonement is the grand plan or movement by which the Son of God awakens to his wholeness and his true nature, which is only love. The atonement completion is inevitable because it's already occurred. It stands outside of time, even though it unfolds within the world of linear time. So the Course tells us that, quote, the sole responsibility of the miracle worker is to accept the atonement for himself. And that comes to us from chapter 2 of that course, paragraph 5. It says, this is so important that the entire sentence is italicized within the text for emphasis. One of the rare instances in the text where this occurs, other than when there's prayers in the text itself. So we're not asked to do anything special or change anything outside of us. We need only to accept in our minds the truth that the separation is illusory and that we remain as God created us. We already contain the knowledge of our true self. We simply need to remember. So as we awaken to this self and its love through forgiveness, we learn from the Holy Spirit that we have to do, learn from the Holy Spirit what we have to do to play our individual part in the atonement. This can take many different forms and appears to be unique to each person. But the form doesn't matter. We each make the journey back to God, understanding that we do so not only for ourselves, but for all the separated sons of God. So atonement is equivalent to salvation. So this is where it ties it together. And in that, it is our salvation from the dream of separation and ego's tyranny. Salvation is a promise made by God, that you would find your way to Him at last. It cannot be kept. It guarantees that time will have an end, and all the thoughts that have been born in time will have an end as well. So that comes from the workbook itself, which is the third part of the Course in Miracles. And that is the promise, the covenant, the atonement. It lives in each of us as the remembrance of God. So really, and I think that was important that we touched on, because I had, my definition of atonement was very different than what I just read to you. And so, and this makes sense to me as we're working through this, versus maybe how a lot of us have been brought to believe in whatever it is that we do believe. I don't know how else to say that other than that. So let's talk about the lesson today for lesson 19, what the exercise is going to be. So, so today we're going to ask that you do for a minute or so, no more than 4 times today. 3 is the ideal. We're going to do a mind searching with today's exercise, which requires it to be undertaken with our eyes closed. So eyes closed today. The idea for today, that I am not alone in experiencing the effects of my thoughts, that's why eyes closed, is to be repeated first, and then the mind should be carefully searched for the thoughts the mind contains at this time. We've done that a couple times now, where we just get a moment of like stillness, close our eyes, say to ourselves, I am not experiencing the effects of my thought, not alone in experiencing the effects of my thoughts, and then just search what those thoughts are. So that's the first part of it. And then it goes on to say, as you consider each thought, name the thought in terms of the central person of the theme the thought contains, and holding the thought in your mind as you do so, say this: I am not alone in experiencing the effects of this thought about so-and-so, whatever that is, as you name that thought. Now, the requirement of as much indiscrimination as possible in selecting the subjects for practice period should be familiar to you, right? Again, whatever comes up, work with that. Don't filter it, don't judge it, just work with it. Don't forget, however, that random selection of subjects for all practice periods remains essential throughout. So again, just a moment of stillness, quiet, close your eyes, say to yourself, I'm not alone in experiencing the effects of my thoughts, and then just wait for what comes. And then do work with that. Lack of order in the connection will ultimately make the recognition of lack of order in miracles meaningful to you. So again, we're beginning to train ourselves to not have to, we're not judging, we're not going to parse things, we're not going to say that's better than this one. We're training ourselves just to take what shows up and work with that. And that's going to be essential as we keep moving forward. Now, apart from the as-needed application of today's idea that I'm not alone in experiencing the effects of my thoughts, at least 3 practice periods are required, shortening the length of time involved if necessary. So again, if it starts bringing stuff up, just shorten it. And do not attempt to do any more than 4. So 3 to 4 is the most. So that's the exercise itself for today. Now let me talk about, I'm going to break it down a little bit in the time we have left. So lesson 18 and 19 were very similar, so yesterday and today. Lesson 18 focused on the effects of your seeing, while this lesson says you're not alone in experiencing the effects of your thoughts. The interrelationship with thoughts, beliefs, and seeing have already been discussed, because we've done this before, not necessarily in that order. The lesson points out that thinking and its results really are simultaneous, and that cause and effect are never separate. Now, in regards to perception, we can easily understand that both observer and something to be observed is needed for our perception. So also the idea that a cause must have an effect, or it is not a cause, is obvious, right? So everything has cause. If it has cause, it has effect. It can't be without the effect. It has cause. If it's cause, it's effect. Cause, effect, and they're simultaneous. So without both, so you'd have neither. So cause and effect are 2 sides of one inseparable coin. In our world of perception, however, we view each part of the one continuous coin to be separate. So that's kind of how we've been conditioned, that we do separate cause and effect. So here's a key distinction. There is no line of demarcation that separates a cause from its effect. They go together. They have to be together. There's no other way it would be. Now, earlier in the course, we said that time was the measure of change. Time, that four-letter word. Time is also the belief that there is a gap between cause and effect. In A Course in Miracles, it states that thinking and thinking's results are actually simultaneous. Yet in our world of time and space, we believe that there is no gap between thinking, that there is a gap between thinking and the cause, and the effect that it has, or the results we get. We think there is a gap. They're simultaneous. They're simultaneous. That's a big distinction. So finally it goes on to say, if the anticipated change in our beliefs is great, we believe a long time interval will be required before our mind will allow the effect of our new thinking to manifest on the experiential level. That's why we've got to be clear that these happen simultaneous. Often our mind will require that we baby step our way slowly towards the change. The time interval that is required before we allow change to physically take place is our contingent on our beliefs and the strength in which they're held. It's our safety plan, right? So as the believability in a new belief increases, the rapidity of the experiences that support that new belief will also increase. It's just how we've been conditioned to do things. We're saying it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. So the idea that you are not alone in experiencing the effects of your thoughts or your seeing implies that there is an interconnection between seemingly separated minds. Whether you believe that the minds are interconnected or not, we all realize in a world of perception that no man is an island, separate and distinct. Instead, the object and the observer are interconnected. Each is dependent on the other for their seemingly private existence. Neither operates in a vacuum. Although we each live in our own private world of individual perception, both object and perceiver share the same common overlap in each other's worlds. This shared overlap is the beginning of a larger collective consciousness within the group itself. The more uniform the beliefs and experiences within a given group, the more stable and similar to that group's provisional reality the group operates in. Now, one of the things, I think a lot of us, and I'm one of them, I always go looking for the science behind that and say, okay, come on, how can that be? How are we interconnected? How is the observer tied into the perceiver? The object and the perceiver. Well, here's they've actually in studying the way the chemicals are released in our brain. You know that when you simply see someone do something nice for someone else, your brain releases dopamine almost to the level that the dopamine is released in the brain of the person doing the nice action for someone. So we are kind of connected, aren't we? Now maybe it's a chemical reaction, but it's still a connection. And so I always think about it that way and go, that is true. And they do have the science behind it to prove it, that when we visualize and we see something nice happen for someone, it gives us almost the same feeling as the person doing it. So as the observer, we get the same benefit as the person doing it, the person taking action. It's kind of cool. So as you end your lesson today then, again, this is just the takeaway. I'm not alone in experiencing the effects of how I see whatever it is that comes up. And then you end it by saying, I'm not alone in experiencing the effects of my seeing. It's that whole idea that we are connected in some way. So we're a few minutes before 9:30. I'm just going to ask if there's any questions or takeaways from today's lessons that you wanted to just bring up in the minute we have left. I am not alone in experiencing the effects of how I see blank. So that's our lesson. Now I have updated the website. So there's things there if you want to go there and grab more of the material. There's a lot of great content out there for us. Any questions, takeaways, comments, or the last announcements before I let you go on with your day? So just make a note that next Wednesday will be at 8:30 on Wednesday because we'll all want to participate in the Lives Worth Living. And if you're not in Bold Pivot, tell you what, it's all about seller listings. Our goal is to have everyone take at least one seller listing in this month of August. Those who are participating. Might be worth $49.50 and some time, energy, and effort. We'll see you tomorrow if I don't see you there. So thanks, everybody. Have a great day.